Hello, and a big welcome to our UOnline University of Miami Thought Leadership webinar today. I'm so excited to having a webinar with you guys. You could be based anywhere. I could say good morning. You might be based in the States. I could say good evening if you're staying up super late in Asia, or good afternoon if you're from Africa or Middle East, or here in Europe where I'm based at the moment. So an international webinar. And we're going to discuss the Florida 50 Index, a fantastic initiative from the University of Miami Online and University of Miami, and brought to you by Professor Seth Levine, who we have today as our special guest. Hello, Seth. How are you?
How are you, Joseph? Thanks very much.
I'm doing great. Better to see you here. So we're two individuals who look quite similar. So I'm the one with the headset on, if anyone gets confused. I'll be your moderator for today. My name is Mr. Joseph O'Brien. We have Mr. Seth Levine. You're an accounting lecturer at the University of Miami. Seth, for the audience that might not know you, can you just give us a bit about your background, your educational background, how you ended up teaching at Miami?
Sure, thanks. I'll try to make it quick. I went to school at the University of Miami, like a lot of hopefully you will be doing in the future, some prospective students. I earned my bachelor's degree in 1983, a couple of master's degrees later on in the 80s. I worked for quite a while with Price Waterhouse, with Arthur Anderson in HR as well. Was a
Nice.
CEO and CFO of an import-export company. But I've been teaching here at the University of Miami since 1990, primarily financial accounting, intermediate accounting, and now most recently in this online degree program, including courses like financial statement analysis.
Okay, lovely. And we're going to kind of dive in a bit about those programs later. We're going to look at some of those modules that we run, investment strategies, accounting, and so forth. And some of the programs that we run, accounting programs that we run at the University of Miami Online. Now, the purpose of today's webinar is to discuss the fantastic initiative of the Florida 50 Index. We're going to discuss the motivation behind the index, the performance of the index, how the students have become involved with that index, and some of the options that you might have for your dissertation or for your career. If you're looking at investment strategies and you're looking and interested in ETFs and these type of things, and this is the right webinar for you. Now, we put about 10 questions forward to Seth, and Seth kindly answered those, and we've got those answers in the form of our slides today, and we're going to discuss those answers, elaborate upon them with Seth. Now, this is an interactive session, so you're going to get what you put into this session. We really encourage you to ask us questions, any questions regarding the course, regarding the Florida 50 Index, or studying online in general. Please ask us your questions. We'll look to get to those in about 30 minutes time at the Q&A mark. So please put your questions there in the little box. We have Michael, he's our producer, who's going to be sending those questions towards me. So thank you, Michael, and thank you guys for sending your questions in advance. So let's get into it, Seth. Let's ask you the first initial question for those who don't know at all. What really is the Florida 50 Index? Then after that, what was your motivation to launch it?
Okay, so the Florida 50 Index, when I teach accounting, whether it's in my ground-based classes or whether it's in online classes, I'm always overlapping with finance. So we invariably, even this week is our first week of classes, we discuss the stock market. We talk about the Dow Jones index, which is the oldest one but the smallest one. We talk about the S&P 500. We talk about the Qs. So I ask students, hey, are you already investing in companies? So it's interesting as students are investing in companies that they know, whether it's Tesla or Facebook or Snapchat. So at some point, since a lot of our students in Miami go to work for Miami employers, companies like Lennar and Ryder and the cruise lines Carnival and Royal Caribbean, I try to encourage students to invest in local companies, and I tell them, hey, just for owning one share of a company, you'll get invited to go to the annual meeting, you'll get to kind of see how corporate governance works. And then I guess I said, since there's a Dow Jones Industrial Average, what would happen if we kind of pulled all of the Miami or the South Florida or the Florida companies together and tried to set that up as an index to see how that's doing in comparison to the nation or in comparison to the world?
I mean, that's amazing. It's called the Florida 50 very simply, as it says here, because it's the 50 Florida-based large, mid, and small cap companies included in the S&P 1500, so that, they're there out on the Dow Jones or the NASDAQ. And so let's dive straight in and have a look at some of these companies. Now, as you said earlier, we can see them coming up. What kind of industries do the companies represent that are popping up on the screen here? Can you name some of them and give us some of the industries that they're from, Seth?
Yes, absolutely, Joe. And you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't initially mention how important S&P Standard and Poor's, Dow Jones,
Hmm.
custom indices has been in this project. I had the good fortune of going to some ETF conferences, which is the most popular way of investing today, and had the good fortune of
No.
getting connected with some folks from S&P, specifically a fellow named Michael Mell. So this has really been a joint effort between the business school, and S&P. We couldn't do without S&P. So we came up with the parameters of the index. We said whoever is based out of Florida, whoever has their corporate headquarters in Florida, but there's a lot of companies, and we needed to set some kind of size parameter. So we got together with S&P and we said, hey, if there's any Florida-based company that is part of the S&P 1500, that's our parameter. And then they're the ones who do the hard work behind the scenes, actually updating it every second of every day, and you can
Mm.
actually see it going up and down, even though it's not an investable product yet, but that might be down the line. So as you see on the slide there, and Joe, I appreciate you and your team putting that together. It's a pretty eclectic mix of companies. You know, the biggest company in the index is Florida Power and Light's parent company, next to Era Energy. And this is a market cap weighted index. So because they're so big, their movements have a big influence on the value of the index, all the way down to smaller companies. But as you can see there, there's Ryder, which is a local homegrown company, which is in logistics. The Watsco, which is actually a refrigeration company. They're actually our basketball center is called the Watsco Arena.
Right.
AutoNation, which is, of course, very well known, the biggest car dealer. Tupperware, everybody knows Tupperware. So it's a really interesting mix. You've got restaurant chains like Ruth's Chris and Darden Restaurants. You've got a lot of REITs, real estate investment trusts. CSX Railroad might be the second biggest company in the index. Even International Speedway, which owns and operates the Daytona 500. So it's really, I don't even know every company in the index and what every single company does, but it's just so interesting, and my students probably know more about it at this point than I do.
I thought the same. I saw Tupperware. I thought there's recognized companies, globally recognized companies, Marriott, Carnival Cruises, and then you have some kind of regional companies, but that are actually big powerhouses like the
Yes.
light and gas company, the energy company. And it kind of begs our next question: how is this index performing against the national index? As you said, it's not an exchange-traded fund yet, an ETF. It's just a group. It's a group of companies under different industries together to look at the performance against the national index. But how does it perform, Seth?
So the good news for potential investors is that we're not keeping this a secret. We share the constituents of the index, especially the top 10, but all of the about 50 companies that are in the index. So fortunately for us, I mean, we had no idea how this would do, but thanks to S&P, we were able to ask them to try to back test the index going back about 10 or 12 years. And
Right.
even back testing it, we outperformed let's say the big benchmark, the S&P 500. When we kicked this off almost 2 years ago, we were also pleasantly surprised to see that it continued to beat the index. So we basically continued to outperform almost every quarter since it's been actively looked at as an index. For whatever reason, the sunshine economy is a positive one. People, the
Yeah.
population growth must have something to do with it. But the mix of industries, the mix of companies, I suppose the talent, the students coming out of the great institutions in the state of Florida, I think all contribute to helping the index beat the overall market. So you can invest in the individual companies. At some point,
Yeah.
maybe we can get this going as an ETF.
Yes, I would agree. It's that the region is a mix of talent, tax opportunities, and fine obviously fine weather and fine opportunities to do business as well. And you can see here, this is I pulled this index for the year. As you can see there, S&P been kind enough to do the mapping for the historical data back 10 years, as you say, and even over this year, it's up 26.17 on the year against the national index, a comparable index. So we really are comparing, well, Florida oranges to other less tasty national oranges, I would say. So, Michael, if you'd like to put the link in so students can and prospects alike can have a look at that. Save it in your browser, save it as a bookmark, and check out how the Florida economy is doing. Seth, this must be quite interesting for research purposes because you now have a tool where you can go back and look at historical data. Can that help students and investors, financial professionals make better projections now because you have better data?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I encourage all of my students, whether it's an undergraduate class or a graduate class, we do have projects where we ask students to compare and contrast publicly traded companies in similar industries. And since a
Mm,
lot of these companies are future employers for our students, it really helps when we have students that are studying the Ryders and the Lennars and the AutoNations and the local companies, because then when they go to them in an interview, it's almost like they've done a final exam on these companies. They know sometimes more
yeah.
about the company than the person interviewing them, so they're able to ask very thought-provoking questions, and it's just been great all around. It's been a win-win.
Well, that's it. I mean, the average person working in the company doesn't have the capacity to do a long-term white paper or a piece of research looking at historical trends. We're just too busy in the day-to-day office. But having students come in and work with those companies on these kind of R&D projects or other projects and initiatives really kind of helps the local economy as well, and breathes some kind of financial creativity into those companies and new ideas and fresh ideas. And that's really an opportunity for our students at the University of Miami, online and on campus. Um, what are the, we kind of touched upon them, but maybe for you personally, Seth, what were the kind of goals and objectives that you wanted to reach with this index before it kind of manifested itself?
Sure, Joe. I mean, it's all really about investor education. I'm just trying to alert our students to all the different ways that they can invest, whether it's through stocks or bonds or real estate investment trusts. I try to promote the Warren Buffett, buy and hold mentality, and all of our courses and the whole program is more about fundamental analysis and doing your homework and looking at the financial statements and doing the ratios and figuring out what a good business valuation is. There's certainly merits in technical analysis and people looking at charts and things like that, and we spend some time in our finance classes doing that. But this has really helped. I mean, we've had our student managed investment fund get involved in looking at specific companies that are part of this. So it's really just about as my lights I think have gone up. Well, I guess I have to move. I think it's just more about just promoting, the home economy. We tend to talk to our neighbors, and we tend to talk to people who work for these companies. So we've actually had several finance professors doing research on, investing in local companies, and we tend to know more about local companies than about companies that are, let's say, outside of the state of Florida.
No, I like that, and also it has a knock-on benefit for those companies. By being involved in the Florida 50 Index, you're involved in a group of companies that are actively being researched constantly, and new ideas and fresh ideas are coming out all the time from the university, and it's a back and forth process. So it can only strengthen and embolden the strategies of those companies themselves. Now, in terms of the launch process, can you elaborate on how you launched it? Was it a long and challenging process? How did you launch Florida 50?
So it actually was. I mean, we kind of came up with the idea a few years ago. I had another professor who I share an office here with, Professor Perez, and one of our doctoral students, John Barrios. And we kind of tossed the idea around for a while. We said, look, there's a lot of ETFs. You can invest in a German ETF, an Israeli ETF. So you can pick a specific country if you're bullish or bearish on specific countries. You can go the industry route. You could say, I think the next 50 years are going to be about solar energy or medical or whatever. So you can slice and dice the ETFs, which is a great investment tool because these are funds that trade like stocks with very, very minimal fees. So then I said, well, could we break it down? Florida is a big economy. Is anybody doing this? And a couple folks took a stab at statewide ETFs a few years ago. I think a couple fellas tried to do in Texas and Oklahoma. It wasn't viable for whatever reason. And then a colleague of mine said, hey, Seth, you may not have noticed, but there's actually a city, Nashville, which is the only city that we're aware of that has actually created an ETF, and there are about 28 or so Nashville-based companies, including Cracker Barrel, for example. And of course, there's Cracker Barrels outside of Tennessee, but that's where their corporate headquarters are. So they've actually been successful in creating an index and converting it to an ETF. So we said, shoot, if they can do it, we should be able to do it for the state of Florida. Florida is a lot bigger than just one city. So we got together. We said which company should be involved. First, we looked at just the S&P 500, but only several companies would make the cut. So we expanded it to the S&P 1500. We got S&P involved. We couldn't have done it without them. And so it's just been a great collaborative effort in getting this to this point.
Amazing, and we'll discuss later what the future might hold for it. In terms of this venture, do you find that this venture can affect trading habits? Is it possibly in the external market? Are people looking at it? Does it change the way people might evaluate the local economy? What kind of reverberation has it had?
Look, I think if we did get to the point where we were able to turn this into an ETF, there are costs, a lot of back office costs involved in an ETF, and you definitely have to have an ETF of scale. You've got to
Yeah,
somehow get maybe 50 to 100 million dollars of people investing in the ETF just to make it viable. So
yeah.
we're not sure that we'll ever get to that point. However, there are ways to invest in these companies. Like, for example, I'll just put in a plug. There's a web service or a company called Motif Investing. And so you could
Mm,
actually go in and figure out who the 10 biggest companies are, or who the 30, there's a max of 30 companies. You could create your own motif, invest in these 30 largest of the 50, let's say, Florida companies. And I think the more people you get doing that, the higher the stock prices are going to be. If you've got more people investing than not,
mm,
it's going to be a way to help to increase investments. And not only that, listen, if I'm here in Miami and I invest in Nike, I can't really
mhm.
go to their annual meeting. It's going to cost me
No.
airfare, time, and whatever. But if I invest on AutoNation, and my students have done this, we've gone together to Lennar, to AutoNation, Ryder,
Exactly.
some of the cruise lines. So we've been able to go to their annual meetings, and annual meetings are very underattended. The employees don't usually go because they're working, and it's usually most annual meetings that I've been to have just been a couple of dozen people there, very, very underattended, underrepresented. So you all have a chance to raise your hand and ask questions, and it's always interesting to see what the CEO, CFO have to say, what the board members have to say. It's interesting to see how diverse, or maybe not how diverse, the board is. I think
Mm.
a lot of people invest without ever knowing who's on the board, and the more diverse the board, probably the more successful the company is going to be. So it's just been a great learning experience for students. And also, when we show up from the U, and people are like, well, hey, what are you guys doing here? Because we're not usually there. So I think it really enhances the University of Miami's reputation as well when we attend these meetings.
No, exactly. It's upfront, actual tangible connection to business. Students often have their head in the books or looking at the journals, and they don't actually get to practically apply that knowledge or go and learn firsthand. And turning up to an AGM or being able to deliver a paper or what have you to an organization is different entirely. Now, a lot of our students are going to be online. They're going to be based all around the world, but a lot of this activity can be done virtually as well. You can, if you come from a completely different country, you can look at motifinvesting.com, some of these different sites, and be able to kind of look at your local economy. Or Seth, I assume that let's take an industry like health technology. So health technology is booming. I assume if you were interested in health technology, you could go and you could curate a group of top performing health technology companies and put them in an ETF or an index, and you could look at how they perform, and then you could kind of gauge what smart investment in that industry is. Is that kind of the process?
That's right. That's absolutely right. But then the thing is, a lot of these ETFs already exist. If you were into health technology, or if you were into cybersecurity, a lot of these ETFs already exist. The beauty of this and motif investing is, if you're in New York and you just want to be a homer and invest in big New York companies, or if you're in
Yeah,
Boston and you want to pick, you can just create those, because those ETFs don't exist yet. So you could just create, again, across industries. You might just go shopping one day and find 10 brands that you think are just really doing well in the
mm,
mall or whatever it is. And so that's the beauty of being able to create these things. So it's a win-win all around. Motif is great. And again, a lot of ETFs, if they don't reach the 50 to 100 million scale, then they end up not being able to support themselves. Nashville, unfortunately, has only raised about $10 million. So I don't know about their long-term viability, but if God forbid they had to close, everybody get their money back, but then you could just kind of replicate that by going on to motif investing and continuing that kind of an investment.
well, that's incredible. I'm sure is the Florida economy larger than the Nashville economy?
Oh, of
I would,
course. Yes,
I
it
would
is.
assume it's much larger. So,
Yeah,
the chance of having 100 million trade in the Florida index is much larger than the
it
opportunity of
is.
that happening
It
in
is.
Nashville. But you're right. There needs to be a high degree of money churn within the ETF in order to warrant its existence. So that's very good. What is the involvement, you touched upon it earlier, of the students, and what could this mean for prospective students? Can you touch upon what the investment fund is, the student managed investment fund is, Seth?
Sure, sure. Thanks, Joe. And that's why these webinars are great, because we actually run these on a weekly basis for our online students, so that even sometimes students just join, they don't have questions, but they want to see what other students are asking. They don't want to miss out. So we've got these live one-on-ones with every professor in all of our courses, which is a lot of fun.
Nice.
So I teach typically sophomores if I'm not doing the graduate program, and then eventually these sophomores major in accounting or finance, and they end up taking a series of finance courses called the SMIF, the Student Managed Investment Fund. So these students will get together and analyze companies, do evaluation. As you can see on the slide there, just recently we invited the CEO, Robert Sanchez, to come out and listen to students do evaluation. I'd be very nervous doing a business valuation, so kudos to these students who did that. Imagine, Tim Cook from Apple, and you're presenting your valuation of Apple.
Thank you.
Exactly what you guys did, and they did a great job, and Robert admitted that he learned a lot from this. So we hope to do more of that. The students are all very excited about the Florida 50, trying to turn it into an ETF. We would need like our endowment fund or maybe the state of Florida pension fund to help to seed it, to actually make it a reality. But it's really just raised the bar in terms of the quality of the projects that our students are doing, both in accounting and finance and across the entire business school.
Exactly. This is a very exciting thing to get involved with, to actually, investment strategies seem very ethereal, especially, when you're young and you're studying. For me, I'm like, oh, my dad has some mutual trust funds, and I never really understood them. And I think it really pays to kind of slowly and surely start understanding all about investment. And this is what this slide is all about. What do you think are some of the key skills that the index can help people develop?
So, right from the get-go, I try to emphasize how important it is to diversify. If a student's going to make their first investment in Tesla or in Snapchat or something that they know, that's fine, but a lot of these companies are kind of one-dimensional. So it is important that when they get started in investing, that they try to diversify, and that's what a lot of these wonderful ETFs can do, where they can invest with one, maybe for $100 or $200, they can invest in the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones or any one of these industries. So the index kind of automatically reinforces the aspect of diversification. We talk about Warren Buffett, we talk about Berkshire Hathaway and how diversified a company like that is. We talk about GE, the only company that's been in the Dow Jones since it started, and how they're such a very diversified company. So by showing students the Florida 50, they realize, wow, Florida is pretty eclectic. There's consumer, there's service, there's technology, a lot of real estate. It's a company, it's a state that really does everything. We don't really have a lot of really large companies out of Miami, let's say. I think Atlanta is maybe the largest city to Florida that has a real big market. We're essentially a middle market economy in Florida, but there's a lot of room to grow. And whether you're back testing the index or looking at it over the last 10 years since it's been live, it continues to beat the broader market. So I think hopefully the biggest thing that demonstrates to students is that you do have to be diversified, and you can't put all of your eggs in one basket.
No, that's very, very true, and they get to learn that firsthand by looking at the fortunes of these companies. How do our programs then prepare our professionals for what's now turning out to be a more automated landscape, where sometimes decisions are made by algorithms? How do our programs, and not just in terms of the Florida 50, but in general, Seth, as an accounting lecturer, how do you prepare our students for an automated landscape?
Well, it's tricky, but we know that it's important to do that. In the accounting program, whether it's at the undergraduate level or the graduate level, it is a longer major. It's a longer major than any of the other majors. So it is important to go through several intermediate accounting courses, auditing courses, tax courses. But the big thing today is absolutely, like you said, Joe, it's about data analytics and business analytics. It's a quant society, and these algorithms are only as good as the theory that goes into them and the people that are programming them, and sometimes they backfire. So we've spoken to a lot of accounting firms that hire, the big four, the Price Waterhouse, KPMG, Ernst, and
Hmm.
Deloitte and all of the wonderful, slightly smaller firms, and they're all like, listen, the accounting's important, but to some respect, uh, we'd even hire liberal arts people if they're smart enough, and we can teach them what they need to know to succeed in our environment. But the key is business technology and data analytics and informatics. So we're trying to include more of that in our curriculum. It's actually a very big initiative for us.
Lovely. I mean, the McKinsey Crook are reporting that there'll be 1.5 million jobs surrounding the subject of big data by
Yeah.
next year as people retire. Computing experts and information systems managers moving to retirement. There's a new need for big data and data analytics, and a lot of that is going to come through finance and fintech.
Yeah.
Fintech is financial technology is one of the biggest growing markets at the moment. For the index, what kind of future developments do you foresee with the index? What's the future hold?
Well, again, we track it. Thanks to S&P, they automatically will change the index composition. If a new big company moved into Florida, they will update it for us automatically. If a big company
Right.
left Florida, they'll take it out of the index if there's mergers, acquisitions. So the parameter is set, and it's been about 50 companies, which is why it's called the Florida 50. So perhaps we'll turn it into an ETF, but really it's just about helping in each one of our courses. We try to talk about it. It's really just about helping students get jobs and do better in their jobs. We talk about the CPA, how important it is for students who are going through our programs to look at that as kind of an end goal. But we do speak about the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst, which is more finance focused and would
Hmm.
have to do with an index like this. And as you said, it's a scary world, but one of the big new things is money laundering and anti-money laundering, and there's a credential called a certified anti-money laundering specialist. There's a
Wow.
certified fraud examiner. So especially our graduate program, we've got courses that focuses on a lot of these things, because it's not just enough to be a CPA. If you can add some of these other
Yeah.
credentials to your resume, it's going to make you that much more employable. It's all about students branding themselves. They've got to do one thing really, really well, and then kind of let
Yeah.
everybody know I'm your go-to guy or gal when it comes to something like that.
Yes, I totally agree. If you have a general accounting background, do you want to be an accountant, specialize in business control? Do you want to specialize in investment, data analytics, auditing? And this is at master's level as opposed to undergraduate level. It's really where you hone your craft, and that's what gets you through the door, and being able to tangibly bring your skills to bear to actual business and to study actual business in the area. That's going to make you much stronger a candidate when you go for that job position. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we all decide to put ourselves through a challenging 2-3 years of studying. Have you seen any, we talked about Nashville a bit, but have you seen kind of any other comparable initiatives on the market? And what is the kind of size of the Florida economy if compared to other countries?
So that's a great question. I don't know that we've had any copycats yet. I would love for there to be copycats, because I think that's the best kind of flattery is imitation. I would love for, my daughter goes to school at Boston College. I would love for like the Carroll School of Management to do something like this for Massachusetts,
Mm.
or for Stern to do this for New York, or for Wharton to do this for Pennsylvania. I think that there'd be a lot that they'd get out of it, even though they wouldn't be the first one, but it would be great for them and their students and the state to do something like that. So no one's doing it yet. Maybe we'll be the first one to actually convert the index into an actual ETF. But you can see how big Florida is, and I appreciate some of your own folks doing some of the stats in the background there. The 17th largest country in the world. I don't know if we're allowed to disassociate or secede. I know Key West has tried to do that.
That's another webinar, Seth.
But yeah, so we're really big, and we've got, like, on NPR we have a show called The Sunshine Economy.
Mhm.
So there
Oh,
are
wow.
folks that are just looking at the Florida economy.
So there's a show on NPR called The Sunshine Economy, so we'll look up that
Yes,
as well for
yeah,
you guys. And there's some resources that we've been dropping in. If you guys have been paying attention to your little chat box there, you have the motif investing and the index as well. So go check it out and save it in your browsers. Yeah, I'm always amazed when they say, "Oh, California, if it stood alone, would be the fifth largest economy, New York the seventh, but Florida the 17th. That's huge. I mean, I'm residing in the Netherlands currently, and I was so surprised to hear that Florida, if it was its own country, has an economy bigger than the Netherlands, the home of Shell, the home of Philips. So I mean, it's very, very impressive. So it's not kind of looking at some small companies in a small region of the States. This is big blue chip industry that students are getting an opportunity to be exposed to. So very exciting work indeed. And there's the podcast that's been put in the chat as well. So it leads me to say, in a way, Seth, congratulations for getting it this far. I think it can only grow. I think it's only going to help people more and more. How do you feel it's been perceived now since its conception? How do you feel about it as well?
Yeah, no, very, very positive. I mean, I owe a lot to my partners at S&P, but all the professors here at the university, it's kind of, put us on the map a little bit. It's given the accounting department, I think an increased awareness, and I think students are starting to look at accounting now maybe as an additional minor or as an additional major. So I think it's been good. Students are excited about it, especially when they find out we were the first ones to do it, and the Gators didn't do it, or the Seminoles didn't do it, or some of our friendly rivals upstate. And the professors have been very, very positive, and all of our deans have been very supportive, because we do pay S&P a little bit of money to do this for us, but we're indebted to everybody, and it's been a win-win all around, and students really enjoy tracking it and looking at it. You can go to Yahoo Finance. You can go to the finance part of Yahoo and just punch in UMIAMIFL, so those 8 characters, UMIAMIFL, and you can see the index moving real time up and down. And on the School of Business website, we give you all the constituents. Well, heck, you guys can see them all right there, and you made it look nice and pretty. And every time I look at it, I see a new company like Raymond James, which does financial services, and Chico's, which does fashion in the retail business. So it's really just cool to see the REITs and the healthcare, and MarineMax, which is in the boating business, and Harris Technology, which does government aerospace up in the Titusville area. 1-800-PET-MEDS, and they've been doing really well. And just seeing Regency centers, because we do talk about REITs, and how I tell my students, 10% of your investments for the rest of your life would be, well, put into real estate investment trust, and you can become a landlord. You can buy a piece of the Empire State Building if you wanted to. So it's just a lot of fun. It's just an educational opportunity for everyone.
No, and I love it. You almost can go through stages of life cycles. When you get older, you're getting more into the cruises. When you're younger, you're looking at how to get down your first house. When you're starting to have a child, you're thinking, gosh, I need some insurance. And so it's, there's so many different companies here. Citrix is here. This webinar is hosted by a platform from Citrix. So I mean, it touches every aspect of life. This as well. Ruth Chris as well. Office Depot. I never get tired of this diagram. It was a labor of love, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we move towards our questions. We've got quite a few questions, Seth, to get through as we hit the half-an-hour mark. So we're just going to discuss some of those questions that we have from the audience in question time. So let's go through them. And you have some links there to our MPO show for the Sunshine Economy, to the finance at Yahoo as well. So you can go and look at those funds in real time as well. So let's have a look. Bear with me as I just go to the top of my questions.
Pet meds is one of my favorite, because everybody's fanatic about their pets, right?
Yes, exactly. What was there's always businesses that you want to go into. Weddings, funerals, and pets is where people are willing to spend money without thinking about it first. So there's, a bit cold to say that, but that's true. Weddings are big business. People will pay for flowers at double the cost just because they're the right color. Now, we have here, what was the criteria? What was the criteria, Seth, that you used to select the companies that belong currently in this group?
That's an excellent question, because there are lots of companies in Florida. Some of them are private, like public supermarkets. And even though they put out a stock price, it's only an internal stock price. We didn't think to include those because you can't possibly invest in them. So initially, we just said, what if we just pick companies that are part of the S&P 500, or just take the 10 biggest or the 50 biggest? But we didn't want to just take the biggest companies, because we did want a cross-section. Dow doesn't just take the 30 biggest companies. It's a cross-section. when we looked at the S&P 500, I'm going to say maybe only the largest made the cut. The Next Era Energy, which is FP&L's parent, CSX
Mhm.
Railroad, some of the cruise lines, it wasn't large enough. So then we went down to the S&P Mid Cap, which is another 400. We still only had maybe companies in the teens, but when we
Mm.
expanded to the S&P 1500, which includes, so you got the large cap, the mid cap, the small cap, and even those 600 S&P small caps are still large. But once we expanded it out to 1500 companies, about 50 companies fell in there, and so they have to be on the New York Stock Exchange or the
Okay.
NASDAQ. So if they trade on another exchange, they're not eligible. So it's got to be, and then it is a kind of passive now because these are the parameters. We can't game it. We can't include companies. I don't make any conscious decisions about putting in, a Burger King or taking out somebody. This is all done by S&P. These are the parameters. If you're in the 1500, that means you're already part of the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, and now it's on autopilot, and that's the beauty of it. So that's kind of how we came up with the criteria.
Lovely. From the audience, where do you see the industry as far as CPAs go in the next 10 years? If you're studying accounting, are there any other courses that would increase your marketability?
Wow. So, the program that we offer, it has 8 courses as part of the master's degree: financial accounting intermediate, audit, tax. We have a financial statement analysis. But the market for the CPA is only going to grow. I mean, it's a market that, in a way, is artificially propped up because every single one of these companies has to
Yeah.
have an audit. Ever since the SEC was created back in 1933, if you're going to play the game of being a public market, you got to have an audit. So
Yep.
there's a lot of work there. Sarbanes-Oxley, you got to audit the internal controls. There's work there. Last time I checked, everybody's got to pay taxes, whether it's these companies, and then when they pay dividends, we got to pay taxes. So there's a built-in job market for accountants, but it's going off onto different dimensions as well. There's a certified fraud examiner, a forensic accounting aspect.
Hmm.
There's the anti-money laundering. There are different accredited in business valuation. So you're going to do the CPA, but then there are these other credentials to make you even more marketable. I don't know any unemployed accountants. I mean, there is like no unemployment rate for accountants. It's just guaranteed work. And accountants, I think the term accountant has a negative stereotype or connotation from TV shows and movies. Accountants are not really accountants as they were in the 20th century.
No.
Accountants today are consultants, they're
Yeah.
advisors, and they're
Yes.
giving advice to their clients, help them do
Exactly.
better.
Exactly, and there are loads of options and different types of jobs, careers, and different types of options for you out there. I mean, I'm from the Netherlands, for example. The Netherlands has the highest rate of women in part-time positions anywhere in the world. My wife is a qualified accountant who's now studying for a master's in controlling, and she's interested in taking her accountancy background and moving it towards control. And then she's going to need leadership skills, and she's going to need those soft skills in order to speak to different offices and run that budget control. So there's lots of nuance in different positions, and she's looking to take that work on, maybe 3 or 4 days a week or do part-time accountancy. There are other people who are looking to work full-time positions in treasuries and whatnot. And I don't think, as you said, Seth, I don't think accountants will ever be out of work. I think that everyone needs an accountant. I'm not sure if everyone needs a webinar moderator though, so I'm sure that she'll be able
Yes,
to provide
absolutely.
for us in the future. An interesting one, something I'm interested in as well. Do you think there's a future for virtual currency markets from an investment point of view, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc.?
I'm going to pass on that one because that's clearly out of my area of expertise. A lot of my students are asking about cryptocurrency, and I
Blockchain.
followed Bitcoin to some extent when it came out, but I've kind of put my focus on other things that I think are easier to understand and less volatile.
Yeah.
So I think it clearly is something that's going to stay and it's part of the future. But I'm going to feign. I mean, I have ignorance in that area, so anything I say is not going to make all of a lot of sense. But we do have other professors who know more about that, and it is part of some courses, especially in the finance curriculum.
Okay, perfect. An interesting question as well. What is the step-by-step process to invest in stocks to make money? Very simple. So someone who's never, I mean, I've never invested in one company before. If I thought today, ooh, McDonald's are coming out with an interesting new burger next week, I reckon sales are going to go up. How do I invest?
So, as far as the mechanics of getting involved investing, it's as easy as opening up an E-Trade or a Scottrade or a Ameritrade. A lot of my students are using an app called Robinhood, which has free commissions, perhaps in exchange for
Nice.
advertising or marketing. So the mechanics of it are pretty easy. But, I really just kind of defer to to Warren Buffett and investing in what you know. And so
Yes.
it's a matter of just observing and looking at trends and sure, visiting the McDonald's or looking at the Chipotle and trying to see what they're doing. But I think if you invest in things that you know, and I tell my students, aside from the E. coli issue, going back over 10 years, my students are all Chipotle fanatics. They're there a couple times a week. You go to any mall store, and what's the most crowded store? It's Apple. Um, so
Yes.
it, so it's really just a matter of investing in what you know, but then also from what you're learning in these courses, looking at the financial statements, looking at trends, looking at growth, looking at prices. Warren Buffett passes up on a lot of great companies because they're too expensive right now. So he's the ultimate bargain hunter. So it's not just enough to find a great
Right.
company. It's got to be at a good price also. So I just really tell my
Right.
students, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Yeah.
read books about Warren Buffett, read books like The Richest Man in Babylon or The Millionaire Next Door. Go to Amazon, and of course, when you buy one of these books, hey, if you like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you're going to love these other books. And so it's just about reading The Motley Fool, where it's all about investor education. I tell my students to read about Susie Orman, who promotes financial education, especially for women, even though she does male bash from time to time. Most of what she says is good for everybody. So I just think, you'll pick up a lot of good tidbits, but it is about diversifying. And you can, it's gambling and it's dangerous.
It
So
is
you do
gambling,
have
yeah.
to be careful with it.
So even from my side, working in digital marketing and events and education and e-learning, if I was to take this tactic, I would assume then, Seth, that I would look at trends within e-learning that I notice, ways and new ways that people are learning in terms of technology, collaborative learning. I'd look at companies that were maybe looking to start ventures in the field of e-learning that I found exciting from my position of knowing the industry. Would that be a smart way for me to invest, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, I tell a silly story about how when my kids were young, I would go to the mall to give mom some time off, and they'd be playing around. It'd be a Sunday morning at noon, and then the mall opens at 1 o'clock, and this was like 15 years ago, and there was this one store that was the only store, kind of like the Apple store today. It was one store that was always crowded. The gates went up, the women dropped and rolled military style, popped up and just started grabbing things off the shelves. And the store was called Ann Taylor, and they're still around. It's called Ann Taylor.
Yeah.
And I invested in them, and that was a great investment for a very, very long time. Today, like you said, I mean, I recently became aware of a company called Instructure. Now, you're in e-learning. I don't know if you've heard of this company called Instructure, but there are a lot of online schools and universities that used to use a learning platform called eCollege. Now, I don't know what happened to
Yeah.
eCollege, but they've now they're using Instructure. Never heard of the company before, but as soon as I became aware of it, I invested in it, and over the last year, their stock price has almost doubled. So maybe I got lucky with that one, but it just kind of talks about and extrapolates on the concept of just invest in what you know. It doesn't get much harder than that, but we still need to do our homework.
Yes, go with what you know. So, I mean, even you demonstrate that there. You're not an expert in Bitcoin, so therefore you don't
No,
have the advice to give someone a full
right.
investment strategy for Bitcoin. You have to go with what you know, and even accounting professionals, top finance professionals, you're not going to know every single industry in order to make investment decisions. So you're going to have to back a horse and pick a horse before going for everything in the race. What I've been playing recently. NFL fantasy football. I'm sure that a lot of people play it across the world and in the States. And I'm very obsessed with all the metadata, player information, um, pass catching, receive catching, average draft position, position on the field, how long they're going to be in the game, and there's a lot of talk about how these kind of games, these stat games, are good look-ins to how you actually make investment strategies, because you take something first that you enjoy and that you can track by watching a game. You have $100 in with 10 of your friends, and you go for a whole year looking at teams, and basically you're looking at stock and stock position, and you're listening to news, and you're trying to back what's going to work. There are quite a lot of fun ways that people can get into investment if they're interested in stats. Would you say this is an area for stat junkies, Seth?
It really is, and My apologies. I'm actually just plugging my computer in here because I just got a message.
And that, everyone, was Seth Levine. We just managed to get all of your questions in. I will thank you, Seth, for your time today. You will hear me thank you when you watch the recording of this webinar. 6:45, we just managed to get everything from Seth. Thank you very much to our audience today for your fantastic questions. Thank you, Michael, for being a producer for the session today. And I'll wish you all good luck in your applications, in your studying. If you are a student at the University of Miami Online, I hope this has given you food for thought about your career opportunities. I hope this has given you food for thought about your possible research projects at the end. Maybe you want to dive down an investment strategy route. But thank you all for your attendance today. This has been a University of Miami Online presentation. Thank you, and good evening to all of you. Thank you. Goodbye.